one of our main focuses is on an area called Taiji, Japan, and that's what we're going to talk to you about today, is how captivity relates, or how Taiji relates to the captivity industry. I think we'll start off by talking a little bit about dolphins in general and what makes them so special. As we all probably already know, but we'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit, is dolphins are highly intelligent animals using tools to solve abstract problems. They're self-aware. One of the ways we know that they're self-aware is by their recognition of themselves in a mirror, testing that's been done in science, which is just incredible work that's been done. Dolphins use complex systems of echolocation to navigate their surroundings. They use it to hunt their prey, which is similar to seeing fish for us, but they can use the sound waves to determine where the fish are. And of course, they also have incredible eyesight. They have an elaborate social network, and family members will often remain together for life. This has been documented specifically up in the Pacific Northwest for over 100 years now with orcas in the wild, that we've seen that generation after generation stays with the main pod. So also, if anybody can't hear me, or if there's any issues with the video or anything, or the presentation, please just go ahead and write it in the notes, and I'll read it as we get going here. So let's talk about what happens in Taiji. Taiji is a very small fishing village in Japan, has right around 3,000 people. Its primary industry is fishing, not specifically dolphin fishing, but fishing in general. For about 6 months of the year, starting at September 1st, goes through to the end of February, they spend their time searching for pods of dolphins off the coast of Japan. From what we've been able to determine, that happens anywhere from the coastline to roughly about 30 miles offshore. A lot of it depends on where the Japanese current is during the particular time of the season. Dolphins get herded into the cove. Some get chosen for captivity based on their age, their gender, and their looks. And unfortunately, some get slaughtered. In Japan, people do eat dolphin meat. It's considered to be highly toxic. We've done lots of testing on dolphins and found really high amounts of mercury. We're just starting to get into testing more and more to figure out about Fukushima, whether there's going to be radiation poisoning in these animals as well. So we're working on that also. So every morning, how it starts is about 10 to 13 boats will head out of the cove right at daylight. This is Taiji Harbor here, and these are pictures, or this is a picture of the fleet heading out in the morning. Now what happens is, let's actually flip ahead. So the boats go out, they locate a pod of dolphins, and they'll begin a drive process. Now what they do, if you look on the boat here, you'll see on the right-hand side of the boat, there's a large metal pole. What they do is they take that pole and insert the pole into the water, and with a hammer will bang on that pole to create a wall of sound. Now the dolphins are trying to get away from that wall of sound, so they can use that wall of sound to herd the dolphins in the direction they want them to go. The goal, of course, for the Taiji hunters is to push the dolphins into the cove using this wall. Now, the process, what happens is the dolphins get netted or trapped into the cove. What they'll do is once they've created this barrier, sound barrier, they will push the dolphins into the cove. They will take a net, pull the net around behind them from one end of the cove to the other end of the cove, which essentially just traps them in there. One of the things that it's hard for us to document to try to figure out are the amount of dolphins that might actually die in the drive process. When dolphins do die, they actually sink to the bottom. So it's not, so we don't see floating dolphins or have dolphins wash up on shore very often because they typically sink to the bottom. The dry process is really, really hard. They could be driven as far as 30 miles, and they're running at a high speed, often aborting fetuses. Juveniles and old dolphins may die. So it's really hard on the pod in general for the dry process. Once they're put into the cove, the whole purpose, there's two things that are going to happen. They're either going to do captive selection, which means they're going to pick out the pretty ones, the young ones, the females for the captivity industry. And then they're either going to release the rest, depending on what species they are, or they're going to slaughter the dolphins. Now, what's really disturbing in this dry process and what we see so often is occasionally dolphins will get through the nets, or not all the dolphins get put into the nets, and we'll see those remaining stragglers outside the cove, and they can hear their family inside the cove, and they won't leave. The water will turn red. Obviously, dolphins are vocalizing, making a lot of noise, but yet those remaining dolphins outside the cove will not leave. They stay there with their family members. A lot of times people ask, well, why don't they just jump the nets? But what you have to imagine is they would have to all decide to jump the net at the exact same time. If one jumped over the net and was on the ocean side, he wouldn't leave. He wouldn't go anywhere. He would stay there because the rest of his family, his social structure, is still within the cove. So they're going to stay there the whole time. Now, there are laws, yes, that protect dolphins, not so much in Japan. Marine mammals are protected, but they are fished and hunted within a quota system. So, to give you an example, in Taiji, the quota is just under 2,000 for this hunting season. They can't take more than that. So the remaining dolphins, of course, will be protected by laws, but not the within the quota system. So the laws in the rest of the world, of course, protect marine mammals, but not as much in Japan. So let's go to the next part. Okay, so here we have a picture of a pod of bottlenose dolphins that was driven into the cove this season. You can see they huddle very close together. They stay there. This is actually a very panicked position. You can see them. They're sky hopping with their heads poking out, trying to figure out what's going on as the boat behind them starts tightening the net to bring them closer and closer to the cove where they're ultimately going to be selected for captivity, these bottlenose hares. So we're being asked here, does the quota include the ones they slaughter or just the ones getting sold to aquariums? Now, the quota is for animals taken out of the ocean, so it would include slaughtered animals and captive taken animals. Now what happens here, you see a picture of what we call the wrangling process. Here we have 5 divers, trainers, on the back of a bottlenose dolphin trying to wrangle it into position to get it netted. And here you can see on the side of the boat, we have the Taiji fishermen here in the skiff, and then the divers and trainers in the water after they've got one netted, which is a really hard process for dolphins. Dolphins' organs are in the bottom, so when they're held in this position like this, it's actually very damaging to them. Survivability rates can be pretty low sometimes because of this aggressive wrangling process that they use. So that brings us now to the life in captivity for a dolphin. So in Taiji, we walked you through the process of how they get them, and now they are looking at a life in captivity. Now, dolphins don't naturally know how to do the tricks that we see on TV. They don't naturally walk on their tails, clap their fins. these aren't natural behaviors in the wild for a dolphin. So they have to be taught to do these actions. The most common way, of course, is through starvation. If you feed an animal when they perform the action you want, then of course that's going to train the dolphin, if he's hungry, to do that action more and more. This is actually pretty hard on the animals because they're not used to being starved in the wild. They have a big giant ocean with an endless supply of food and aren't used to having to do these actions to get fed. Because they're starved and the very small areas that they're confined in, they are generally pretty heavily medicated, both antidepressant drugs. They have to rehydrate these animals. They have to often are on a lifetime course of antibiotics as well. Long-term exposure to drugs, of course, is going to shorten their lives. So they starve the animals to get them trained to learn the procedures they want them, or the tricks that they want them to learn. They keep them medicated, and like I said, often with antidepressant drugs and, of course, antibiotics. Now they've got to get them to the parks. So here's a picture of the process of putting them in a sling. They hoist them. A skiff has brought it over to a seawall. And this is in Taiji, Japan. They've now hoisted this bottlenose dolphin up into the air and are going to put it in this truck. Now, a truck like this would typically hold up to 4 dolphins at a time. And a few different places they're going to go from here. Most likely, they're going to head to an airport where they're going to be exported out to other countries. Korea, Russia, China are all places that we know for sure that are purchasing them. Places in the Middle East. And then also Japan has a lot of aquariums of their own, or dolphinariums, and they will be trucked to those dolphinariums as well. Because dolphins have a shortened life in captivity, they're kind of viewed as being disposable. So the animals will be taken kind of at liberty and just replaced. Now, life in captivity for a dolphin. We all know that dolphins don't wear funny hats. They don't jump through hoops. Clapping their fins is not a natural, wild action for a dolphin. If they don't do the tricks, they don't get fed, which starves them into doing the tricks. They're, of course, separated from their families. These are animals that live in social structures their entire life, most likely. And they've now been separated and placed with other pods, or with dolphins from other pods, maybe from other parts of the world. So it would kind of be like you being put in a bathroom with somebody from Greece and somebody from Italy and somebody from Canada, maybe somebody from Asia, and you're all just sitting in this room trying to figure out what to do and how to communicate. You speak different languages, you have different social structures, and you're from both different families. So it's obviously very, very stressful for these animals, which is why they have such shortened lifespans. And then, as I had said before, most dolphins in captivity take medication on a daily basis for stress, antidepressant drugs, antibiotics, and of course, because they're fed dead fish, they have dehydration issues. So they have to, they'll inject the fish with water, sometimes feeding them gelatin as well, to help rehydrate the animals because they can't get enough hydration through dead fish. All of these things kind of lead to these animals becoming much more aggressive in captivity. And there's many, many stories of dolphins hurting people, even killing people in captivity. Very few stories of them ever harming anybody in the wild. So now we're being asked here what the lifespan of dolphins in captivity is compared to the wild. And it's a little hard to give you an exact answer, only because not all dolphinariums around the world share that data of how long their animals live. It's not uncommon for a dolphin to live in captivity for 4 or 5 years. Depending on the species, some dolphins are thought to live to be 100 in the wild. Orcas are thought to live somewhere between 60 and 100 years. In captivity, they usually live a much shortened lifespan. There are a couple of very rare exceptions to that, but for the most part, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 8 years is not uncommon for a dolphin's lifespan in captivity. Versus the wild, certain, like I said, certain species can live to be 60, 80 years old. Now we're going to pass through this part. I don't think it's going to click. We had a short little video, but we'll move on. Of course, the biggest question, what can you do? It's the most common question everybody asks. One of the first things we encourage everybody to do is what we call taking the pledge. You can go to our website, of course, Rickleberry's Dolphin Project. There's a big, giant orange banner on the top that says Take Action. You click that button, and the first thing we like everybody to do is take the pledge. Never go to a dolphinary, never buy a ticket. The purchase price of that ticket supports the drive fisheries in Japan. Dolphins are slaughtered and killed as a result of people buying tickets to go to a dolphin show. The slaughters are fueled by the dolphinariums, not the other way around. So, of course, that's the first thing you can do. So let's see. We've got a few questions here, so I want to try to answer them for you. My fourth grade. Okay, the question is that wanting to know if this is a issue happening at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. I would make the argument that any dolphin in captivity, this is the issue. This is the situation. Any place you go where you buy a ticket and that dolphin does any type of performing act for you is a dolphin show. Those animals did not learn any of those tricks without being starved first. Can't happen. Again, they don't naturally tail walk and clap their fins. I've spent most of my life on the ocean and have seen literally millions of dolphins. I've never seen a wild dolphin jumping up in tandem and doing backflips. These are trained actions, and they're done in a very cruel way. They have to starve these animals to get them to perform in the way they want them to perform. So I haven't personally been to Shedd Aquarium, so I'm not going to speak specifically from firsthand experience, but if you go to Shedd Aquarium and there is a dolphin show where the dolphin swims around, jumps, flips, claps, splashes you, does any of these types of actions, then that's what's happened. Now we have another question here, talking to how dolphins get rehydrated. Because they're fed dead fish have less water content in them than live fish do. And because they have less water content in them, they have to get more water in the dolphin. So what they'll do is they'll take a syringe and inject it into the fish. Now, they also will put the medication, the antidepressants, the antibiotics, into the fish as well, and then feed that to them. I know in the case of orcas, they feed them gelatin. You'll see big, giant chunks and blocks of gelatin that they'll feed to the orcas in an effort to try to get them rehydrated. I've heard as much as 80 to 90 pounds of gelatin may have to be fed a day trying to get them rehydrated. So thanks, Jennifer. And this is a great question. How does the loss of dolphins affect the environment? Well, dolphins, as we all know, are a top predator. And in Japan, they have a philosophy that dolphins tend to eat the fish they want to eat. Therefore, they look at it as removing the predator from the ocean so the fish they want to eat can grow more abundant and they would have more of them. Uh, Anybody with any environmental experience understands and knows that this is just a completely false point of view. We've shown it, hundreds of times in nature that we've seen this. When we remove wolves, we lose other forms of our environment. Trees have died in areas where wolves have been completely removed because then deer overtake the population and eat all the seeds and just goes on and on and on. So dolphins are a top predator in the ocean, and so which makes them extremely important to our environment. A lot of scientists are now, we used to think of our environment from the bottom of the pyramid up. We're now starting to realize that the importance may lie at the top of the pyramid with the predators. You look at whales and what whales do to the environment, the amount of poop that they poop and the ecosystems that are created just from whale poop, which is incredible. So we look at dolphins as all parts of our ocean, but we look at dolphins as a very, very important part of all ecosystems. The thing we have to consider in Japan too is that these are migrating animals. These animals aren't native to Japan. They don't live in Japan, off the coast of Japan year-round. This is actually populations of animals that belong to the entire world. They just get hunted when they swim off the coast of Japan for 6 months of the year. So they're actually hurting other countries' ecosystems by removing dolphins that are swimming off their coast for that 6-month period, which is horrible for the rest of the world, but Japan doesn't quite see it that way. With this happening yearly, are the dolphins in danger of becoming endangered or extinct? So, yeah, essentially, absolutely. We have seen the quota since our first work started there back in 2003. So we've been tracking the numbers and watching what's happening since 2003. And we are seeing reduced numbers each year in the drive hunts and the slaughters. So I'll tell you a story about another little town in Japan, in Ito, Japan, or specifically a town called Futo, which also did the dry fishery. In fact, they kind of invented this dry fishery, using the acoustic sound wall to drive dolphins into an area or drive them up onto a beach where they could be slaughtered. And they had a quota since this goes back since the mid 60s, sometime 1960s. And in the early 2000s, the numbers just started dropping off, and they were not making their quota. The numbers were becoming less and less and less and less, and it was becoming more and more expensive for these boats to go out, spend the fuel, the manpower. The fishermen's unions were spending a lot of money, and they weren't catching the numbers that they were catching. Today in Futo, I've been on several whale watching or dolphin watching trips now in Futo, 3 specifically. I've yet to see a dolphin on one of these trips. And they're in prime dolphin hunting season for Japan, but in this area of Futo, I've never seen anything other than birds on this trip. So yeah, we run the risk of decimating populations of dolphins, and not just within Japan. Like I said, some of these species migrate great distances. So we're decimating species of dolphins for other countries as well, who might have environmental or ecotourism based businesses that are going to suffer because the dolphins, of course, are disappearing. And please feel free, anybody has questions, don't hesitate to ask. So Rickaberry's Dolphin Project has been working specifically in Taiji issue, the Taiji drive hunts since 2003 when Rickaberry first started going down there. Our organization was founded in 1970 on Earth Day. Rickaberry, of course, is the famed dolphin trainer who captured and trained the dolphins from the movie or the TV series and the movies Flipper. In 1970, he had a change of heart on Earth Day specifically, and went to Bimini and started cutting nets and to release dolphins. And since 1970, has spent all of his efforts into the captivity issue and releasing and fighting against captivity, trying to educate it. Rick first went to Taiji for the captivity issue back in 2003. And has been back every single season since 2003 until this year. This is the first year, 2017, that Rick has not been in Japan. He was actually deported from the country in last January. So he currently cannot come into the country. But that's something that, it's a legal battle, so that's something that we will continue to fight and see what we can come up with. Our entire mission and goal is captivity. I do. I'm sorry. Let me see. It looks like I do have some questions here, but I need to scroll down a little bit. So give me just 1 second here. Okay. Can I share my thoughts on dolphin intelligence? Are humans really the most intelligent species on the planet? Wow, that's a loaded question. And a lot of science and a lot of varying opinion on that. We do know that dolphins are self-aware. That's something that's been proven. They do recognize themselves in a mirror. They know who they are, which probably, and to me, answers the most important question. They're self-aware. They know they exist. Therefore, that gives them a certain level of intelligence. Are they the most intelligent animal on the planet, or smarter than humans? That's a question. They don't have thumbs, so they have a different evolutionary process than we have. We were able to come out of the ocean and can build things and have a little bit different of a life. Does that make us more intelligent? I don't know that it does or doesn't. They have very social family structures and are thought to be extremely intelligent animals. So Rick often talks about this, and I always get kind of a chuckle out of it. Are humans smarter than dolphins? And from Rick's perspective, training dolphins, for a good portion of his life, he was always taught to train, or he always taught dolphins to perform tricks based on hand commands. So he would teach the dolphins to understand his communications. But no actions are ever done to learn in the other directions for dolphins to communicate with us. So who's smarter, them or us? We teach them to only follow us, obey us, and do our commands. We put no effort into learning to communicate with them. So I would have to say, I don't know if they're smarter than us or more intelligent than us, but they're certainly intelligent, and of course they're very, very self-aware. Let's see. Make sure I'm not missing any questions here. So, like I said, if you do have any questions, of course, feel free. Just type them right in, and we'll be glad to answer them. Now, going back into the dry fisheries that happen in Taiji from September 1st through the end of February for most of the species, and then for pilot whales, the permit extends into May. We have a team of people who are on the ground. They stay in Taiji documenting every single day from September 1st through whenever the end of the season is in February, early March. And the whole purpose of documenting is to determine how many are slaughtered, how many are taken for captivity, and try to gauge what they're doing, what the impact is on the environment and the people of Japan, because they are eating toxic animals. Okay, so we do have another question here from Canton. When people swim with dolphins, are they hurting the dolphins? Well, yeah, of course. If you're swimming with dolphins that are in captivity, these dolphins are in small confined areas. These dolphins are taught to interact with you based on being fed. So if they don't interact with you, they're not going to get fed. The dolphins in the wild aren't going to swim up to you and, pull their side to you so you can grab their fin and pull you through the water. Doesn't mean dolphins won't interact with you in the wild, but definitely not the way they're interacting with you in captivity. So yeah, if you're doing a swim program, swim programs have some of the highest death rates of all captive dolphins because they're under a much higher stress level. They're much more disposable to the facility. They can just get another animal. So yeah, they're very that's very detrimental to the dolphin population for sure. So definitely you're hurting the dolphins, in our opinion, if you're swimming with dolphins. The captivity industry really views dolphins as a disposable source. No different really than a zoo. If you go to a zoo or many zoos, I should say, and an elephant dies, they'll just get another dolphin or elephant. Dolphin shows are quite the same way. If they're taking your money to view the animals in captivity. If they don't have the animals in captivity for you to view, then they can't get your money. So, of course, they're just going to continue to put animals in there. Why do dolphins seem to swim with boats? We often see dolphins playing in the wake of boats. Dolphins are very, very curious animals. They love to get up in the wake of the boat and swim with the wake of the boat. They're in the wild, they're not afraid because, of course, they can just swim away. They have a whole giant ocean to go anywhere they want to go. So they're extremely curious and very, very playful animals, and will, of course, come swimming right up to boats and get in the wake and play with them. So they're very curious. So what would be the most impactful thing we can do? Simple. Educate, 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 educate. If nobody buys a ticket to go to a dolphin show, the drive hunts end, the slaughters end. The best thing you can do is to educate every single person you know to not buy a ticket to a dolphin show. That ends everything. If the tickets aren't being purchased for these dolphin shows, these places are not going to make any money. If they can't make any money, they're not going to take dolphins out of the wild, which means dolphins in Taiji won't be slaughtered. Let's see. Avery, a 9-year-old, would like to know how long has this all been going on, taking them out of the wild for shows? Well, the popularity of dolphin shows really grew in the 1960s and 70s with the TV show Flipper. So that's really kind of the, dolphins have been taken out of captivity prior to that. Taken out of the ocean for captivity prior to that. But that's really, the 60s and 70s is really kind of the height of when dolphin shows became popular and have grown steadily from that point forward. And a lot of that, of course, was as a result of TV shows like Flipper that painted a little bit different of a view of captivity for animals, as though they wanted to be there. Rick has a book out called Behind the Dolphin Smile, which is a play on the fact that dolphins always look like they're smiling, so they always look happy. So it gives a false impression of how these animals really feel. They don't have the ability to frown. So thank you, Avery, for that question. Is there a different breeds of dolphins? Yes, there are different breeds of dolphins and porpoises. In Taiji, the quotas that they impose for hunting and slaughtering and taking for captivity include bottlenose dolphins, spotted dolphins, false killer whales, white-sided dolphins, striped dolphins, rhesus dolphins, and pilot whales. And there may be, I think that's the main ones. Those are the ones, at least, that we see from year to year. So there are many, many, many different types of dolphins. There's actually over 40 species that we know of. Okay, so which species are at risk? Any species swimming off the coast of Taiji is at risk. We've seen a decline in all of the species being taken out of Taiji over the last year. They're currently only able to capture and or slaughter about half their quota, a little less last year. So last year, they had 2,000 quota. They took a little over 800. This year, we're looking at about 675. We still have another 3 weeks to go. January and February, of course, the big months when a lot of activity happens. So they could very quickly and easily get that number up there. But right now, it looks like they're probably going to be close or a little less than what they had last year. So to answer your question, Jennifer, all species are at risk, especially in Japan. There's another dolphin slaughter that happens. It's an offshore hunt that happens for a porpoise called the Dall's porpoise, and they can take up to about 10,000 of those a year and slaughter them. So you can imagine taking that many top animals, top predators, mammals out of the ocean is just devastating to an ecosystem. How long do the dolphins stay in the trucks when they are being transported? How are they fed during transportation? We have seen them putting food in the trucks. Of course, it's dead food into the transporting trucks. And like I said, we've seen up to 4 dolphins going across. They're put actually in wood crates. They put foam pads in the bottom of the crate, and then they lowered into a wood crate. That wood crate is then forklifted and set into the truck. If the dolphin is being driven in Japan, it could be in that crate for, if it's going up to northern Japan, I mean, that's 12, 14-hour drive. If they're being flown to an airport, it would depend on when the flights are leaving, but it would not be unheard of for a dolphin to be in that wood crate for 24 hours as it's flying around the world. Which is, like I said, it's really hard on dolphins. Their organs rest against their belly when they're in those crates like that, and often cause damage. It's not uncommon for a dolphin to perish in transportation or in transport. What made you decide to work in this field, and if we want to follow your path, what steps would we need to follow? Well, my journey started with a movie called The Cove. It's a movie that follows Rick's work in Japan. The movie actually won an Oscar, and I believe it's won more film festival awards than any documentary ever made to date. So it's a very, it's kind of a thriller. I encourage everybody to always watch The Cove. A lot of people say, oh, I can't watch that. I'm not going to watch that because They think it's going to be all blood and gore. And in the whole movie, there's less than probably 3 or 4 minutes of kind of gruesome pictures or images that you may watch. And the whole rest of the movie is actually kind of a thriller about a man fighting the dolphin slaughters and captivity issues in Japan. So after watching that movie, my wife and I decided that this was we couldn't believe it was still going on. We're like, oh, this must have ended. The movie came out, it must be done. So we did a little research online, and we got connected with Rick's group and contacted him and told him that this was something that disturbed us, and we're both ocean people, and we're very involved, eager to see if there's something that we can do to help. And so we joined Rick O'Leary's Dolphin Project back in 2010 and started going to Japan to witness what was happening and document it for the world. The idea being that if we're there documenting it, then we're still sharing with the world that this is something that is still going on. And then while working with Rick, we he encouraged us down the correct path of this is a problem of Japan. And we need to help find ways to get Japanese people involved. So that kind of became our role in going to Japan, trying to find Japanese activists, trying to find people in Japan that would be interested in working on this issue, and having them work with it and document it within Japan so that they can share to the rest of their world. A lot of people think that this must be over, it can't be happening anymore, and that everybody in Japan knows about it. But the truth be said, not a lot of. I think everybody in Japan is aware that dolphins and whales are on the plate, but not exactly the tie between the captivity industry and Taiji's dolphin slaughters. So that's where our work lies, is trying to live stream this every single time it happens, taking pictures, videos, and pushing it out there as much as we can in the Japanese media, so that Japanese are aware when they're watching these dolphins in these dolphin shows. This is where it happens, that literally a trainer is under a tarp pointing at a dolphin saying, take that one, and watching that the one next to it get slaughtered. And these are trainers who, if you go to a dolphin show, they're telling you their love of dolphins, and they're usually marine biologists or people who have some basic science education, but yet they're literally under a tarp picking out which one gets to live and which one's going to be the showpiece for a new dolphinarium or another show or attraction. So that really affected my wife and I, and we became very, very involved in the organization in trying to educate people to make sure people understood that the connection between the dolphin slaughters and the captivity industry in general. So that was my path. And what can you do? You can do the exact same thing. Education is key. You can join an organization working against captivity. You can go, of course, to rickleberrysdolphinproject.com, and you can sign up to become a volunteer there. We do have a application process for people who want to go to Taiji and actually document the slaughters. You can fill out an application, go through the process, and show up in Taiji and help film and write about what's going on. But you can also do much more simpler things, like you can host a viewing of the Cove to your friends and your family, to your school, to your church group, to your Boy Scout, Girl Scout group. There's no limitations. You can show the Cove to anybody and get them on the path to the connection between dolphin slaughters and the captivity industry. Let's see. Okay, so has the problem gotten worse or better in recent years? Now, we have seen a decline in the slaughters and captives in Taiji. So in that sense, it has gotten better. But dolphinariums are popping up all over the world. So the demand for captive dolphins is I don't think, any less as a result of the exposure of Taiji lately. But hopefully with everybody's help and education that we can change that. If people quit buying these tickets, then it's going to get better and better and better. These dolphin shows aren't going to be able to exist without tickets being purchased, without generating money. Support the organizations that do really, really great work and great things without having to and able to educate you about dolphins without having to show you a dolphin doing a trick and doing a flip. That's kind of the way it's got to be done. So I would say the problem has gotten better in the sense that the numbers, or we are seeing numbers drop slightly and continuously throughout the years. But there's still a really big education process that has to happen, and it's a global education process. This isn't something that just has to happen in the States or in Italy or in Asia. This is a worldwide education program that needs to happen. The whole world needs to be educated on the issues of captivity and the harmful effects that we're doing to the environment by taking these animals out of their natural environments. Are the dolphins ever released back? Okay, so yeah, so are dolphins ever released back into the ocean? So first, let's talk about in Taiji specifically. When dolphins are driven into the cove, often there are some species that are not as popular for eating or potentially converting into fertilizer or pig food or some other form of a byproduct. And they will just do captive selections, take the animals, and herd the rest of the animals back out to sea. Now, keeping in mind the effects, a lot of people get really excited, like, oh, they're driving them back out, they're being environmentally responsible. But what you have to consider are how many of these animals died in the drive process, how many of these animals died in the cove. We've seen them. After the whole process is done, they have divers that go in the water and sweep the bottom, looking for the ones that didn't survive, the ones who died from stress or from being manhandled, or sometimes they're kept in the cove for 2-3 days, so maybe they're dying of starvation. There's a lot of issues. So yes, some of the animals are released back in the wild, but they're released back in the wild potentially without the leaders of that pod. That social structure is devastated. They've taken juveniles and females and just devastated the pod itself, and then just thrown the rest back out. We also have documented many times where they've had juvenile dolphins. They've known that we're documenting, so they want to look environmentally friendly, so they've released the juveniles back out to sea. But those juveniles can't survive without their family, without their mothers, and the rest of the pod. So those juveniles either probably wind up starving or find themselves falling to prey, being eaten by sharks or other animals. So yes, they do release them. Now, do they release captive dolphins? Meaning, after they've been captive, can they release them back into the wild? The short answer is yes. And Rick has written a protocol on the training process, basically the detraining of a dolphin, and how to do that. And it's been done successfully several times. Korea recently, in recent years, has released dolphins. In fact, there have now been, thanks to Rick's protocols that he created on how to do this, they've actually released captive-born dolphins into the wild, and those dolphins have reproduced. So that's really good news. Typically, captive-born dolphins would not be a candidate for being released into the wild. For many reasons. Do you want to release an animal that doesn't have the social structure that a wild-born dolphin would have, and then reintroduce that behavior into an environment? Probably not. Doesn't mean it can't be done, and hasn't been done. But often captive-borns are viewed as probably not candidates for release. Also, dolphins that have been in captivity for long periods of time are not looked at as candidates for release, probably because they go through, I mean, many years of torture, and they don't behave the same anymore, and their refusal to eat wild food. Why chase food down when if I sit here, somebody will throw something at me? So a lot of long-term captive dolphins would not be able to be released back into the ocean. Now, that brings us to Rickleberry's Dolphin Project, and one of the projects we're working on are sanctuaries for these animals. We currently have a couple spots worked out and are working on the idea of building sanctuaries around the world where, like Camp Loompa Loompa in Indonesia, potentially some stuff we're working on in Greece, where we can take captive dolphins that are not candidates for release necessarily, bring them to a sanctuary where they can live out their lives with the rhythm of the ocean, the tides, and then potentially, if they can be rehabilitated to live in the wild, then they could, at that point, they could be released. But at least they wouldn't live in a cement tank with, all the noise that they have to deal with the pumps pumping water in and out, which isn't something that in the wild, they have to experience, on a 24-hour day or 24-hour basis every day. And, doing food for tricks and having people throw stuff at them and large crowds and music and, all that kind of stuff. And then, in captivity, we see them, if they're not doing those things, they're just logging, they're just floating, which is not something you see in the wild. And all my years of being in the ocean and seeing, like I said, I've literally seen millions of wild dolphins now. I've never came up on a dolphin that was just floating, just laying there. But in captivity, if they're not doing tricks, they're not working, that's exactly what you see. All they're doing is logging, they're laying there, completely bored. There's nowhere for them to go, nothing for them to do. So they just float around. Not a natural behavior at all. And let's see. Just lower down here real quick, see if we can find any other questions. So if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to jump in. And I will repeat again, of course, please, one of the things you can do is go to rickleberrysdolphinproject.com. You can also, at the very top, there's a big orange Take Action button where we have lots of suggestions like showing the movie The Cove, taking the pledge to not buy a dolphin, or buy a ticket to a dolphin show, educating friends and family, becoming a volunteer, going to Taiji, documenting the captive and slaughter processes. So lots you can do. You can also follow us on all of our social media accounts. Our Facebook account is Rickleberry's Dolphin Project. We also have Twitter and Instagram, which is @dolphin_project. That's @_dolphin project. So you can always follow us there and see what. And we do, during the dry hunt season in Taiji, we do report live or in real time. We do live stream and show video footage that's live from the cove, showing everything that's going on. Let's see. Yes. Thank you, Kelly. There is, she's showing some educational resources. Dolphin Project on dolphinproject.com. We do also have some educational material formatted for teachers on how to educate against captivity issues. Let's see. So, how many calves can a dolphin potentially have in their lifetime? Well, that's a great question, and it's probably more related to the specific species of dolphins. They can have dolphins seasonally, but different species, of course, have different birth rates. So that's kind of a difficult question. Obviously, in the wild, it's going to be much more productive than in captivity. Often in captivity, dolphins are artificially inseminated. In the case of parks, that have orcas, they usually have a bowl where they will manually extract the semen and then artificially inseminate it into the females. So it's not a natural process at all. So those animals are birthed at whatever rate the parks decide that they want them to birth. And thank you, Jennifer. We really appreciate everybody taking the time and allowing us to present a little information about captivity and how Taiji relates to the information about captivity and how Taiji relates to the captivity industry in general. Our mission is education, and like I said, we do document all over the world, Indonesian, Solomon Islands, Taiji, the United States, Europe. We're all over the world trying to work on captivity issues and specifically how this is all relating to the Taiji drive hunts, which a lot of people think, because they're hunting and eating these animals, and they're just going to take a couple, but it actually works in reverse. The captivity industry is what fuels the drive hunts. Without the finances and the money they make from the captivity industry, the drive hunts for the slaughters would make no sense financially for them to do, and it would probably end. So that's our mission. And thank you, Kelly. Again, we really appreciate all of you guys being here and listening to what we had to say. We'd love for you guys to go to dolphinproject.com and follow our work and interact and communicate with us. You can ask questions on our social media accounts, which is, for Facebook is @Rickleberry's Dolphin Project. For Twitter and Instagram is @Dolphin_project. We're always excited to work with schools and educating any way we can. Like I said, we have curriculum course outlines that we've created for schools and teachers. And we would absolutely love to work with any schools who want to further educate themselves on captivity issues around the world. So feel free to follow us, and you can ask us questions directly. You can contact me directly as well. I believe the beginning gave our email address, so you're welcome to communicate directly with us. And are there any other last-minute questions? I'll give you guys just, I think we're down to 1 minute here, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll give you guys any last quick questions, and then I think we'll sign off. All right.